Thank you for the laugh. I appreciate that, Snicker. The third book of the Torah, the book of Vayikra, we begin today, and I just want to, start with some sort of midrashic notion. There's an idea that Vayikra was often taught to kids in the beginning, that the kids would start not with what we start oftentimes today, the book of Breshit, the stories of the patriarchs, the matriarchs, but sometimes Breshit in the past was a starting point. And perhaps part of the reason, the starting point, and there are a number of reasons, is the idea of Derech Eretz Kodma Torah. That Derech Eretz, which literally means the way of the world, but the way we understand it is more of kindness, decency. Decency comes before Torah or before entering. And there are a couple of comments here early on in the Midrash of Vayikra, which talks about that. What happens at the end, or what happens here in the beginning of the book of Vayikra, is Vayikra, God calls to Moshe. And before speaking to somebody, what we need to have is a sense of etiquette. You don't just start talking, you call them, you call their name, you pick up the phone, right? You have to show decency, a polite human interaction, polite human behavior. Torah is subtly grounding manners in divine behavior. There are stories in the Talmud that talk about how there were great rabbis who would welcome everybody in the shuk. It says in the Gemara Masechet Brachot, Afilu Nachri, even the stranger, even the person that these great rabbis, I can't remember whose name it was, they would greet everybody in the marketplace. You have to say hi to people. You have to be decent. And so here at the beginning of the book of Vayikra, God calls out to Moshe to tell Moshe to come into the temple. Similar idea of the Midrash in regards to what it says. It says, Ki yakriv Adam mikem. It says when an Adam, now we have a couple of different words in the Torah for human. More often at times, well, you could say the word Ish is more of a man. Adam is also a man. Maybe it means man and woman more than Ish, but it doesn't say Ki yakriv Ish mikem. It says Ki yakriv Adam mikem. And the Midrash points out that it's a reference to Adam Harishon. And we've had this before in different ways. We talked a lot in the book of Shemot, how Shemot connects with Breshit. We talked about it last week, the last couple of days, because the end of Shemot and the end of Breshit with the Aron and the word Pekude. So here Adam harkens back to the book of Breshit in a sense as well, Adam Harishon. And the Midrash says, just like Adam could not offer a stolen offering, he could not bring a carbon that was stolen because in the Torah's understanding of the world, everything belongs to Adam. He's placed in the Garden of Eden and everything is his. Now, he can't eat from the tree, that one particular tree, but he couldn't bring a stolen offering. And just the same way Adam could not bring a stolen offering, so too a regular person can't bring an offering that's stolen. You have to make sure that the carbon is not stolen. Before the ritual matters, before the details of the carbon, which animals you can bring as a carbon, where you bring it, how much you have to bring it, what time you have to bring it, when it has to be eaten, who gets to eat from it, what's burnt. We have the ethical ownership matters. A sacrifice built on injustice, or lives, especially ritual lives built on injustice, are invalid from the start. So there are some ethical ideas that we have here in the beginning of Vayikra. Some more ideas over at the beginning, right? So the book starts, in a sense, one could say mid-scene. Vayikra, God calls to Moshe, and and it's like mid-sentence. I don't know about you today. I think it's okay, but back when I was in school, they would say you can't start a sentence with an and. I think a lot of the rules have fallen by the wayside these days, but back then, right? And is you're in the middle of something. But what the Torah is trying to say is that the book of Vayikra is a continuation. At the end of the book of Shemot, God's cloud fills the Mishkan. It's so concentrate, Moshe cannot enter. Nobody can enter the Mishkan. And God calls him from the inside. The God's presence fills the Mishkan, and Moshe cannot enter it. So Vayikra is actually a solution to the problem. And think about it in many different ways. Think about psychology. We talk about this a lot, especially with Moshe. I love to say over and over again this idea that I heard, and I feel badly, I can't quote who it was that said it, that God could fill Moshe because Moshe was not full of himself. Moshe was empty and was available, was allowed for people to come in. It seems that the Vayikra, the end of Shemot, the Mishkan is full, but God calls Moshe in. You have to invite people in. You want to gain a better life. You want to know more about the world. You want to know more about yourself. You have to allow people in. So God here calls Moshe in, and so it's sort of the end of Shmot into the beginning of Vayikra, continuing in the same way. Something that's pointed out about the word Vayikra, if you looked into the Torah, you have to trust me, or you've seen it before, is that the Aleph is small. We have certain places, not that many places in the Torah, I can't say off the top of my head. It's a good question for AI, but check to make sure, double check to see if it's correct. But in a few places in the Torah, we have a small letter. So we have a regular size Vav, Yud, Kuf, and Resh, and then a small Aleph. And the rabbis connected it to, we have a similar word, Vayikar, which is used in reference to Bil'am Harasha. We talked a little bit about Bil'am in a midrash relating him to Yitro a few weeks back. Bil'am, of course, is going to give advice to Balak. Balak wants to curse the Jewish people. He does not curse them. He blesses them, but later he gives them bad advice to have the Jewish people stray and with idolatry and adultery. But when it talks about God calling out to Bil'am, it says Vayikar. And what our sages, what Chazal say about it is that Moshe did not want to look too grand. And so the Aleph is too small, but without the Aleph, it would seem to be the same language that's used to Bilam. And God does not want to have Moshe and Bilam, right? God calling to them in the same way. So the Aleph, in a sense, is smaller, is what happens. God makes the Aleph smaller, but Moshe doesn't want to look too grand. And there's a beautiful idea about it. We think about Moshe and we talk a lot about Moshe's humility, Moshe's greatness, but humility is about appearing too important. It's about being uncomfortable with it. It's not about being important. Moshe, I assume, even at this point in his life, let alone 39, 40 years later, before he passed away, understands how important it is, how significant it is, how he is, I shouldn't say it is, he is, stands in front of Paro, frees the Jewish people, God's spokesman, up on Har Sinai, the concentration of God, the Anan is in the Mishkan, nobody else can go into it, and Moshe can go into it. He understands these important, but he's uncomfortable with it. He does not want to be seen as being special, as being different. And that's, in a sense, is at the core of his humility and and who he who he is. Now we have the beginning of Vayikra, and Vayikra, of course, is the Torat Kohanim, is the way that it's understood. It's the book that really talks about the different sacrifices. And we begin, earlier we mentioned the word Adam. Adam ki yakriv mikem korban lahashem. Okay, now the pasuk reads a little strangely. Adam ki yakriv mikem. When a person brings from themselves, from you, an offering, mikem is a sort of strange word. It could just be Adam ki yakriv karban la Hashem. Mikem is a little bit of an unnecessary word, and so the rabbis try to understand, what is this mikem? What's this perhaps extra unnecessary word? And the general nice idea that comes out of it is that the real sacrifice is not the animal. The offering must come from yourself. And to say this, we have to understand something which I think we've talked about in the past. You probably know the word for sacrifice is a karban in the Hebrew. A karban comes from the word karov, close, proximity. The idea of a karban is the idea of being close to God or attempting to come close to God. That's the whole idea of a karban. Now, if we think about it, right? Oh, here's my sacrifice. There it is. I'm a rich guy. I can give this animal. I can give that animal. Or I'm not such a rich guy, but I can still give and still give that. This is not say 3 Hail Marys and call me in the morning. This is not, give $1 million and you are free of all your sins and God has forgiven you. Because that's what one could take out of the karban process. That I've come to the temple, I've given the sacrifice, I did what was necessary, I've been forgiven from my sins, or I have now shown my appreciation to God for all the blessings that I have in life, and can see it as very performative. I've gone through the procedures. And thus we have to have a little bit of the wording of Adam ki yakriv mi kem. The sacrifice has to come from you. You have to understand, I'm not being sacrificed, but I am the person who's coming close to God, and I am the person who's supposed to have something that is a perfected. There has to be some sort of interchange, some sort of transformation. Now, we're not talking about changing your life completely, a complete transformational procedure that changes everything, but the animal is the symbolic vehicle through which the person comes close to God. Now, it goes, it aligns itself in many ways with, let's say, the Rambam, Maimonides, who writes numerous reasons for sacrifices, and probably the most well-known one, he talks about that sacrifices were a vestige of the time, and that's what Bnei Israel needed to bring to come close to God. But in the long run, we would get rid of sacrifices, and what would we have in the place of sacrifice? We would have prayer, which is, I'm not using the animal as the vehicle. I am now myself coming towards God, considering my life, thinking about things, praying. And as many understand, prayer is not me actually requesting things from God, but the prayers are almost instructional. They are the things that I am, quote unquote, requesting from God, but they're supposed to be teaching me what I want. And like it talks about wisdom in the prayers. Well, wisdom doesn't come from sitting around. You want wisdom, so you're asking God for wisdom, but go read a book, go study something, find a good teacher. You asking God for health. So yeah, ask God for health, make sure, protect over me, but eat the healthy food, go for a walk, do the exercise, help out with your mental health. So the prayer service, in a sense, which has taken place of the sacrifices, according to the Rambam, according to others, has allowed us to almost skip the vehicle through which we were able to come close to God, and now we can do it in a more purified, dignified, closer way. And so we have this whole book of sacrifices, which are distant from us in many ways. When the rabbis talk about, right, Bimhira b'yameinu, we should rebuild the Beit HaMikdash. So we have these questions. Well, what does it mean? Are we going to be sacrificing animals? Is that what we're going to be doing? That doesn't sound so great and, religious and contemplative and meaningful to me personally. Blood gushing everywhere, the spilling of blood onto different. So there are those who have moved away from that with the understanding. So we're sort of like this understanding from the Rambam that we've moved away from that aspect. But the idea of a karban, right? We say a sacrifice or an offering, but we have to know, right? The word in the Torah for a karban, the word comes from the word karov, to come close to God. The ultimate idea is coming close to God. The 3 pilgrimage festivals, you go up to Yerushalayim, where you come physically close to God, and that should have a meaningful sort of a meaningful impact upon your life. So here we have sort of that idea embedded in, and in many ways we've moved beyond the embedded ideas into the way that we do our avodah, our service of God. We've gotten rid of, because it was destroyed, the sacrificial animal, and now are able to hopefully approach God straightforward in that way.